Even at the crack of dawn, the city was alive with energy. The markets were a harsh mixture of sounds, vendors shouting over one another to advertise their goods. Amidst this vibrant chaos, Abike moved with a practiced ease. At 60, she was no stranger to the hustle and bustle of Lagos. She was a familiar face in the market, known not just for the items she sold, but also for her warm smile and generous spirit. Abike had lived in Lagos for decades, raising her 4 children in the same city. But now, they were all grown and living abroad, leaving her alone in a modest apartment. Despite the quietness of her home, Abike never felt lonely. The market was her community, a place where she found connection and purpose every day. This particular morning was no different. As she navigated through the busy market, greeting friends and acquaintances along the way, something unusual caught her eye. A young man, visibly struggling, was trying to carry a large, heavy box. His face was etched with frustration as he attempted to weave through the crowded street, but the burden he bore was clearly overwhelming. Abike watched him for a moment, her heart moved by the sight. The young man was tall and strong, probably in his early 30s. Yet the weight of the box and the heat of the day seemed to be too much for him. Without a second thought, she approached him. "Let me help you with that," she offered, her voice warm but firm. The man, surprised by the sudden offer, looked down at her. He hesitated for a moment, clearly unsure of how to respond. "Ma, I can't let you do that. It's too heavy," he finally said, shaking his head. Smiled, not discouraged. "Nonsense. We'll carry it together." Before he could protest further, she moved to one side of the box and grasped it firmly. The young man, realizing that she wasn't going to take no for an answer, together they lifted the box and moved it to a safer spot off the main path. As they set it down, the young man let out a sigh of relief, wiping the sweat from his brow. He turned to Abike, his expression one of genuine gratitude. "Thank you, Ma. I didn't expect anyone to help, especially not someone like you," he said, still a bit amazed. Abike chuckled softly, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "Age doesn't stop me from lending a hand. My name is Abike." The young man smiled in return, extending his hand. "I'm Kunle. I really appreciate your help. I didn't expect to struggle this much today." "It happens to the best of us," Abike replied, shaking his hand. "The market can be overwhelming, even on a good day." They stood there for a moment, sharing a brief but comfortable silence. The market buzzed around them, but in that instant, it felt as though they were in their own little world. "Are you new to Lagos?" Abike asked, breaking the silence. Kunle nodded. "Yes, I recently moved here. I'm trying to set up my business, but it's been more challenging than I expected." "Lagos can be tough for newcomers," Abike said, nodding in understanding. "But you'll find your way. Just remember to take things one step at a time." Kunle smiled, feeling a little lighter from her words of encouragement. "Thank you, Abike. That means a lot." "Anytime, Kunle," Abike replied. "And don't hesitate to ask for help when you need it. This market is full of people who've been where you are now." With that, they parted ways, each going on with their day. But as Kunle continued through the market, he couldn't shake the encounter from his mind. There was something about Abike, her strength, her kindness, her willingness to help a stranger, that stayed with him long after they had parted. For Abike, it was just another day in Lagos, but for Kunle, it felt like the beginning of something new. Kunle Adeyemi was a man on a mission. At 30, he had left the comfort of his small hometown, determined to carve out a new life for himself in Lagos, the city of endless opportunities. Growing up in a close-knit family in the quieter outskirts of Ogun State, Kunle had always dreamed big. He was ambitious, driven, and full of ideas, but life in a small town had its limitations. He knew that if he wanted to achieve the kind of success he envisioned, he would have to venture out into the world beyond his familiar surroundings. Kunle's decision to move to Lagos wasn't an easy one. It meant leaving behind his aging parents, who had always supported his dreams, but Kunle was determined. He had always been the kind of person who embraced challenges head-on, believing that nothing worthwhile ever came easily. His plan was simple, at least on paper. Establish a small electronics business in Lagos, grow it steadily, and eventually become a major player in the industry. But reality, as Kunle quickly discovered, was much harsher. Lagos was nothing like the sleepy town he had left behind. It was fast-paced, competitive, and often unforgiving. The market in particular was a chaotic whirlwind of haggling, negotiations, and unspoken rules that Kunle was still learning to navigate. Despite the challenges, Kunle was determined to make it work. Every day he threw himself into his work, setting up shop early in the morning and staying open late into the night. He dealt with difficult customers, negotiated with suppliers, and learned the ins and outs of Lagos's business culture through sheer trial and error. But no matter how hard he worked, there were moments when he felt overwhelmed by the sheer scale of what he was trying to accomplish. It was during one of these particularly challenging days that Kunle first met Abik. He had been struggling to carry a heavy box of electronics through the crowded market, feeling the weight of not just the box, but all the uncertainties and pressures he faced as a newcomer to the city. When Abik offered to help him, Kunle was taken aback. In his experience, Lagos was a place where everyone was too busy with their own lives to lend a hand to a stranger. But Abik had been different. Her kindness and strength had left a lasting impression on him. Days after their initial encounter, Kunle found himself thinking often about Abik. He was struck not just by her willingness to help, but by the ease with which she navigated the market and her calm demeanor in the face of its chaos. There was something about her that intrigued him, something that made him want to know more about her. A week after they first met, Kunle returned to the market, this time not just to buy supplies, but with the hope of seeing Abik again. As he moved through the busy stalls, his eyes scanned the crowd, and soon enough, he spotted her standing behind her stall, engaged in a friendly conversation with a customer. She looked as composed as ever, completely at ease in the bustling environment. Gathering his courage, Kunle approached her stall. Abik noticed him immediately, and a warm smile spread across her face. "Kunle, it's good to see you again," she said, her voice genuinely pleased. "It's good to see you too, Abik," Kunle replied, returning her smile. "I wanted to thank you again for your help the other day. I've been thinking about it a lot." "There's no need to thank me," Abik said, waving her hand dismissively. "I was happy to help. How have you been managing?" Kunle sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's been tough. Lagos is different from what I'm used to. I've been trying to get my business off the ground, but it feels like I'm constantly hitting roadblocks." Abik nodded, her expression understanding. "Lagos can be unforgiving, especially to newcomers. But you're doing well, Kunle. It takes time to find your footing here." Her words, simple as they were, filled Kunle with a sense of relief. He hadn't realized how much he needed to hear them until that moment. They continued to talk, with Kunle sharing more about his struggles and his hopes for the future. Abike listened attentively, occasionally offering advice drawn from her years of experience living in the city. As their conversation flowed, Kunle felt a connection forming between them. It wasn't just about the advice she gave or the stories she shared. It was the way she listened, the way she seemed to understand him in a way that few others did. There was a quiet strength in Abik, a wisdom that came from years of navigating life's challenges, and Kunle found himself drawn to it. Their meeting that day set the tone for many more to come. Kunle began to seek out Abika whenever he was in the market, and each time they met, their conversations grew longer and more personal. They talked about everything, from the challenges of running a business to their thoughts on life in general. Abike shared stories of her late husband and her children, who were now scattered across different countries, pursuing their own lives. Kunle, in turn, spoke of his family back in the small town, his dreams of making a name for himself in Lagos, and the pressures he felt to succeed. One afternoon, after they had spent nearly an hour talking, Kunle made an unexpected suggestion. "Abik, would you like to have tea with me sometime? Away from the market, I mean. I think it would be nice to talk somewhere quieter." Abik was taken aback by the invitation. She had enjoyed their conversations, but she hadn't anticipated Kunle wanting to spend time with her outside of the market. Still, there was something in his earnest expression that made her smile. "Tea sounds lovely," she agreed. "Where do you have in mind?" "There's a small cafe not far from here," Kunle said, his tone brightening. "It's a quiet place, perfect for conversation." They agreed to meet the following afternoon. When the time came, Kunle arrived at the cafe early, nervous but excited. He had spent the entire morning preparing for the meeting, going over what he might say, and wondering if Abiki would see him differently outside the market's familiar environment. Abik arrived shortly after, dressed in a simple but elegant outfit that made her look younger than her years. Kunle stood to greet her, his nervousness easing when he saw her warm smile. "You found the place easily enough?" he asked as they sat down. Yes, it wasn't hard, Abike replied, taking in the cozy atmosphere of the cafe. This is a lovely spot. I've passed by it a few times but never stopped in. They ordered tea and pastries, and as they sipped their drinks, their conversation flowed as naturally as it had in the market. However, in the quiet, intimate setting of the cafe, there was a different energy between them. Without the distractions of the bustling market, they were able to focus entirely on each other, deepening their connection. As they talked, Kunle found himself opening up more than he had intended. He spoke of the fears he harbored, the pressure he felt to succeed, and the loneliness that sometimes crept in during his long days in the city. Abike listened, her gaze steady and compassionate. Kunle, she said gently, you're carrying a lot on your shoulders. It's normal to feel overwhelmed, especially in a place like Lagos. But you don't have to face it all alone. Her words struck a chord in Kunle. It wasn't just what she said, but how she said it, with such sincerity and care. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of comfort that went beyond the surface. It was as though Abike understood him in a way that others didn't. Their meetings at the cafe became a regular occurrence. Each time they grew closer, sharing more of their lives and their thoughts. Abike found herself looking forward to these meetings, feeling a sense of excitement that she hadn't experienced in years. Kunle too felt a shift within himself. What had started as a simple friendship was beginning to evolve into something deeper, something he hadn't anticipated. Despite the growing bond between them, both Kunle and Abike were aware of the differences that set them apart. Differences in age, life experience, and the societal expectations that loomed over them. But in the quiet moments they shared, those differences seemed to fade away, leaving only the connection that had formed between them. As the weeks turned into months, their friendship became a source of strength for both of them. Kunle found himself relying more and more on Abike's advice and support, while Abike felt a renewed sense of purpose in her life. The market, once just a place of business, had become the backdrop for a friendship that neither of them had expected, but both had come to cherish. However, as their connection deepened, so did the complexities of their feelings for one another. Kunle began to realize that what he felt for Abike was more than just friendship. He admired her strength, her kindness, and the way she made him feel understood and cared for. But as these feelings grew, so did his uncertainty. He was acutely aware of the significant age difference between them and the societal norms that frowned upon such relationships. Abike, too, found herself grappling with emotions she hadn't expected. She had come to care deeply for Kunle, but the thought of anything beyond friendship seemed impossible. She was old enough to be his mother after all, and the world would surely judge them harshly if they were to pursue anything more. Weeks passed, and the once unexpected friendship between Kunle and Abike continued to deepen. Their regular meetings at the cafe became a cherished routine, a respite from the challenges each faced in their respective lives. For Kunle, these moments with Abike were a refuge from the relentless pace of Lagos and the pressures of his burgeoning business. For Abike, they were a source of joy and a renewed sense of connection that she hadn't felt in years. On a sunny afternoon, as they sat at their usual table near the window, Kunle found himself more distracted than usual. He stirred his tea absently, his thoughts far from the conversation they were having about a recent festival in the city. Kunle, you seem preoccupied today, Abike observed, her voice gentle but probing. Is something on your mind? Kunle looked up, startled from his thoughts by her question. He hesitated, unsure of how to express what had been weighing on him for the past few weeks. The truth was, Kunle had been struggling with his feelings for Abike. What had started as admiration and respect had grown into something much deeper, and he wasn't sure how to handle it. I've been thinking a lot lately, Kunle began slowly, carefully choosing his words. About us, about what we've become to each other. Abike's heart skipped a beat. She had been sensing a shift in their relationship as well, but she hadn't dared to voice it, unsure if Kunle felt the same way. What do you mean? She asked, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. Kunle sighed, setting down his spoon and meeting her gaze. Abike, I care about you. A lot more than I expected when we first met. I've been trying to figure out what that means, and honestly, it's been confusing. Abike felt a rush of conflicting emotions. Relief that she wasn't alone in her feelings, and fear of what those feelings could lead to. Kunle, I've grown to care for you too, she admitted. But we both know this isn't a simple situation. There's a lot to consider. Kunle nodded, his expression serious. I know. The age difference, what people might say. I've thought about all of that. But the more time I spend with you, the more I realize that those things don't matter to me as much as I thought they would. Abike looked down at her hands, her mind racing. She had spent so many years following the path expected of her, raising her children, managing her household, and living by the societal norms that governed her world. The idea of stepping outside those norms, of embracing something so unconventional, was both thrilling and terrifying. Kunle, we have to be realistic, she said after a long pause. People will talk. They might not understand, and it could be difficult for both of us. I know it won't be easy, Kunle replied, his voice firm. But I don't want to ignore what I feel, just because it's unconventional. Abike, you make me happy. Happier than I've been in a long time. Isn't that worth something? Abike's heart softened at his words. She had lived long enough to know that true happiness was rare and precious. Kunle's presence in her life had brought her a sense of joy and fulfillment that she hadn't expected to find again. But she also knew the world they lived in, the judgments they would face, and the challenges that came with defying societal expectations. Kunle, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I'm not sure I have the strength to face what we might go through if we decide to be together. I've always done what was expected of me, and this would be different. Kunle reached across the table and gently took her hand in his. Abike. I'm not asking you to decide right now. I just wanted to be honest about how I feel. I care about you, and I'm willing to face whatever comes our way if it means we can be happy together. The warmth of his hand in hers sent a surge of emotion through Abike. She looked into his eyes and saw sincerity, determination, and something else, something she hadn't seen in a long time: love. It was a love that defied logic, a love that wasn't bound by age or societal expectations. It was a love that had grown quietly, steadily, over the months they had spent together. I need time to think, Abike said softly, withdrawing her hand from his. This is all so much to take in. Take all the time you need. Kunle replied, his voice gentle. I just wanted you to know how I feel. Whatever happens, I'll respect your decision. They finished their tea in a more subdued atmosphere, both lost in their thoughts. When they finally parted ways that afternoon, there was an unspoken understanding between them. Things had changed, and there was no going back to the way things were. The days that followed were filled with contemplation for Abike. She went about her daily routine as usual, but Kunle's words echoed in her mind. She found herself thinking about him constantly, replaying their conversations and imagining what it would be like to be with him, to defy the expectations that had governed her life for so long. Her children were adults now, living their own lives far from Lagos. They had their own families, their own concerns, and though they loved her dearly, they were not a constant presence in her life. The thought of finding happiness with someone new, someone who genuinely cared for her, was both appealing and frightening. Abike knew that choosing to be with Kunle would mean facing the disapproval of many. There would be whispers, judgmental glances, and perhaps even harsh words, but there was also the possibility of finding a love that was real and fulfilling, something that had eluded her for so many years. Meanwhile, Kunle struggled with his own doubts. He knew the risks involved in pursuing a relationship with Abike, who was twice his age, but every time he thought about walking away, he couldn't bear the thought. He had found something special with her, something that went beyond friendship, beyond the societal norms that dictated who he should be with. One evening, as the sun set over the streets of Lagos, Kunle found himself at Abike's door. He hadn't planned on visiting, but his thoughts had been consumed by her, and he needed to see her, to talk to her, to know where they stood. Abike opened the door, surprised to see him standing there. Kunle, I wasn't expecting you, she said, stepping aside to let him in. I'm sorry for coming unannounced, Kunle said, his voice earnest. I couldn't stop thinking about what we talked about, and I needed to see you. Abike led him into her living room, where they sat down on the sofa. The room was filled with the warm, comforting scent of the evening meal she had just prepared, and the soft glow of the lamps created an intimate atmosphere. I've been thinking about it too, Abike admitted, her voice quiet. About us, about what it would mean if we decided to be together. Kunle leaned forward, his gaze intense. And what have you decided? Abike took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. Kunle, I won't pretend that I'm not afraid. I am. This is something I never imagined for myself, and I know it won't be easy. But I also know that you've brought something into my life that I didn't realize I was missing. You've made me feel alive again. And that's something I can't ignore. Kunle's heart swelled with hope. Abike, you mean a lot to me. I did not know I would feel this way again after I lost my husband many years ago. I know it's unconventional, and I know there will be challenges, but I'm willing to face them if it means we can be together. A small smile formed at the corners of Abike's lips. Then let's take this one step at a time, she said. We don't have to rush into anything, but we can explore what this means for us, together. Kunle reached for her hand, his touch gentle and reassuring. Together, he echoed, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. That evening marked the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship. They didn't have all the answers, and there were still uncertainties ahead, but they had taken the first step towards something beautiful. Their love, once hidden beneath the surface, was now beginning to blossom, and neither of them could deny the joy it brought into their lives. As they sat together, watching the city lights twinkle outside the window, Abike rested her head on Kunle's shoulder. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of contentment, a quiet happiness that filled the empty spaces in her heart. Kunle, too, felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had found something rare and precious in Abike, a love that was worth fighting for. The days following their decision to explore a relationship were filled with a mixture of excitement and apprehension for both Kunle and Abike. They continued to meet regularly, enjoying each other's company as they always had, but now with an added layer of intimacy that made their time together even more precious. Yet both of them knew that their newfound happiness would soon be tested by the realities of the world around them. It wasn't long before their relationship began to attract attention. The market, usually abuzz with gossip, was quick to notice the changes in the dynamic between Kunle and Abike. What had once been seen as an innocent friendship between a young man and an older woman now raised eyebrows and fueled speculation. Whispers followed them as they walked together, and the once welcoming faces of the market vendors and regular customers began to show signs of disapproval. Kunle, ever the optimist, tried to ignore the gossip. He had made his decision, and he was determined to stand by it. Abike, however, found it harder to brush off the judgmental stares and muttered comments. She had lived her entire life according to the expectations of society, and the weight of that conditioning was not easy to shake off. One morning, as they sat together in a classy restaurant, Kunle noticed that Abike seemed more subdued than usual. She sipped her tea in silence, her eyes downcast, clearly troubled by something. Abike, what's wrong? Kunle asked gently, reaching across the table to touch her hand. Abike looked up, her expression conflicted. Kunle, I'm finding it harder than I thought to deal with what people are saying. Everywhere I go, I feel like I'm being judged. Kunle sighed, his heart aching for her. He had known that this would be difficult, but seeing the toll it was taking on Abike made it all the more real. I'm sorry, Abike. I wish there was something I could do to make it easier. It's not your fault, Abike replied, giving him a small, sad smile. I knew this would happen. I just didn't realize how much it would affect me. Kunle squeezed her hand reassuringly. We don't have to let them get to us. What we have is real, and it's worth fighting for. Abike nodded, but her expression remained troubled. I know, but it's not just the people in the market, Kunle. I'm worried about what will happen when my children find out. They've always looked up to me as a pillar of stability and tradition. I'm afraid they won't understand. Kunle's heart sank at the mention of Abike's children. He hadn't yet met them, but he knew how important they were to her. He also knew that their approval, or lack thereof, could make or break their relationship. We'll deal with that when the time comes, Kunle said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. But Abike, I need you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what happens. I'm not going anywhere. Abike gave him a grateful smile, but the uncertainty lingered in her eyes. She appreciated Kunle's support, but the doubts gnawed at her, making her wonder if they were truly strong enough to withstand the pressures they would inevitably face. The first real test came sooner than either of them expected. One evening, Kunle received an unexpected visit from his closest friend, Tunde. They had known each other since childhood, growing up in the same small town and moving to Lagos around the same time. Tunde was like a brother to Kunle, and his opinion mattered more than most. "Kunle, we need to talk," Tunde said as he stepped into Kunle's small apartment, his tone serious. Kunle nodded, sensing the gravity of the conversation to come. They sat down on the worn-out sofa, and Tunde wasted no time getting to the point. "I've been hearing things, Kunle. People are talking about you and Abike," Tunde began, his expression a mixture of concern and disbelief. "Is it true? Are you really involved with her?" Kunle met his friend's gaze, his resolve firm. "Yes, it's true. I care about Abike, and we've decided to see where this relationship takes us." Tunde stared at him for a moment, clearly struggling to process the information. "Kunle, she's old enough to be your mother. What are you thinking? This isn't normal." Kunle bristled at the word normal. He had anticipated this reaction, but it still stung to hear it from someone he considered a brother. "I know it's not what people expect, Tunde, but it's not about what's normal. It's about how I feel. A bike makes me happy, and that's what matters." "But Kunle, think about your future," Tunde pressed. "You're young, you have your whole life ahead of you. You should be with someone who can give you a family, someone you can grow old with." Kunle clenched his fists, trying to keep his temper in check. "And what if I don't want what everyone else wants? What if I found something real with Abike? Isn't that worth pursuing, even if it's not conventional?" Tunde sighed, running a hand over his face. "I just don't want to see you get hurt, Kunle. This kind of relationship, it's going to be hard, and I'm not sure it's worth it." Kunle looked at his friend, his eyes filled with determination. "I appreciate your concern, Tunde, I really do. But I've made my decision and I'm willing to face whatever comes. Abike is worth it." Tunde shook his head, clearly unconvinced. "I hope you know what you're doing, Kunle. I really do." After Tunde left, Kunle sat in his apartment, his mind racing. The conversation had shaken him more than he cared to admit. He had always valued Tunde's opinion, and the fact that his friend couldn't support his relationship with Abike left him feeling more isolated than ever. Meanwhile, Abike was facing her own set of challenges. She had always prided herself on her strength and independence, but the whispers and judgmental glances were beginning to wear her down. She dreaded the day when her children would inevitably find out about her relationship with Kunle. She knew they would be shocked, perhaps even disappointed, and the thought of losing their respect terrified her. One Sunday afternoon, Abike's eldest daughter, Sade, called from London, where she lived with her husband and 2 children. The conversation started out pleasant enough, with Sade asking about her mother's health and how things were going in Lagos. But as the call went on, Abike could sense that Sade had something more serious on her mind. "Mom, I've been hearing some things from back home," Sade began, her voice hesitant. "People are saying that you're involved with someone, a much younger man. Is that true?" Abike had known this moment would come, but she wasn't prepared for the fear that gripped her now. "Yes, it's true," she replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil she felt inside. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Sade finally spoke, her voice was filled with a mix of confusion and concern. "Mom, what are you doing? This isn't like you. You've always been the one we looked up to, the one who set an example for us. This relationship doesn't make sense." Abike closed her eyes, trying to find the right words. "Sade, I know this is hard for you to understand, but Kunle makes me happy. He's brought something into my life that I didn't realize I was missing. I'm not asking for your approval, but I need you to trust that I'm doing what's right for me. But Mom, what about your reputation? What about what people will think? You've always been so concerned with doing what's proper. How can you just throw that all away?" "Sade, I've spent my whole life doing what was expected of me," Abike said softly. "For once I want to do something for myself, something that makes me happy." Sade was silent again, and when she finally spoke, her voice was strained. "I don't know what to say, Mom. I just hope you're sure about this." "I am," Abike replied, her voice firm. "I know it's not easy to accept, but I hope that in time you'll come to understand." The conversation ended on a tense note, and Abike felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. She had expected resistance, but hearing the disappointment in her daughter's voice cut deeper than she had anticipated. She knew that this was only the beginning of the challenges they would face. Later that evening, Abike sat in her living room, lost in thought. The room was quiet, but her mind was anything but. She had always been the strong one, the one who held everything together. but now she felt the weight of her choices pressing down on her. She wondered if she was truly strong enough to face the consequences of her decision. As if sensing her distress, Kunle called. When Abik heard his voice on the other end of the line, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. "Abike, how are you?" Kunle asked, his voice filled with concern. "I've had better days," Abike admitted, not bothering to hide the weariness in her tone. "I had a difficult conversation with Sade today. She knows about us." Kunle was silent for a moment, then sighed. "I'm sorry, Abike. I know how important your children are to you." "It's not your fault," Abike said quickly. "I knew this would happen. I just didn't expect it to be so hard. Do you want me to come over?" Kunle asked, his voice gentle. "We can talk, or just sit together. Whatever you need." Abik hesitated, then nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "Yes, I'd like that." Kunle arrived at Abik's apartment a short while later, and as soon as he walked through the door, Abik felt some of her tension ease. They sat together on the sofa, and Kunle took her hand in his, offering silent comfort. "Abika," he said after a while, "I know this is difficult, but we're in this together. We'll face whatever comes, side by side." Abike looked at him, her eyes softening. "Thank you, Kunle. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'll never have to find out," Kunle replied, squeezing her hand gently. The weeks following Abik's difficult conversation with her daughter were tense but also filled with moments of unexpected joy. Despite the challenges they faced, Kunle and Abik grew closer, their bond deepening as they leaned on each other for support. Kunle, ever the optimist, believed that their love could overcome any obstacle, and he was determined to prove it. As they sat together in Abike's living room one evening, Kunle found himself unable to hold back the thoughts that had been consuming him for days. They were side by side on the sofa, enjoying the simple comfort of each other's presence, but Kunle's mind was racing. "Abik," he began, his voice uncharacteristically nervous. "There's something I've been meaning to talk to you about." Abik turned to him, her expression curious. "What is it, Kunle?" Kunle took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "I know things have been difficult lately, with everything that's been happening. But despite all of that, I've never been more certain of how I feel about you. You've brought so much happiness into my life, and I can't imagine my future without you in it." Abike's heart skipped a beat. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, but she wasn't sure where he was going with this. "Kunle." Kunle reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. As he opened it to reveal a simple but elegant ring, Abike's breath caught in her throat. "Abik," Kunle said, "will you marry me? I know this isn't the most conventional relationship, and I know we'll face more challenges ahead, but I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Tears filled Abik's eyes as she looked at the ring, then back at Kunle. She had never imagined finding love again, much less being proposed to by a man as young and vibrant as Kunle. But as she looked into his eyes, she knew that his love was real and deep, and it touched her in a way she hadn't thought possible. "Kunle," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Are you sure? This is a big decision. It's not just about us, it's about what we'll face together." Kunle nodded, his resolve unwavering. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Abik. I love you, and I want to be with you, no matter what anyone else thinks." Abike felt her heart fill with love and gratitude. She reached out and took the ring from the box, slipping it onto her finger. "Yes, Kunle, I will marry you." Kunle's face lit up with joy, and he pulled her into a tight embrace. "You've made me the happiest man in the world, Abike." As they held each other, both of them knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, a chapter that would be filled with both love and challenges. But in that moment, they were content to simply be in each other's arms, knowing that they had taken a significant step forward in their relationship. The next few days were filled with a quiet sense of joy as they began to plan their future together. They discussed their wedding, which they both agreed should be a small and intimate affair, surrounded only by those who truly supported them. But even as they made these plans, they were both acutely aware of the storm that was brewing on the horizon. Kunle's family. Kunle knew that his parents would not take the news well. They were traditional, conservative people who believed strongly in the norms and values that had been passed down through generations. He had always been close to his family, particularly his mother, and the thought of disappointing them weighed heavily on his heart. But he also knew that he couldn't let their disapproval dictate his life choices. It was with a mixture of determination and dread that Kunle decided to break the news to his parents. He traveled to their home in Ogun State, knowing that this conversation would be one of the most difficult of his life. His parents greeted him warmly, as they always did, and his mother quickly prepared a meal for him, delighted to have her son home. But as they sat down to eat, Kunle knew he couldn't delay the conversation any longer. "Mom, Dad, there's something important I need to talk to you about," Kunle began, his voice steady despite the nerves he felt. His parents exchanged a glance, sensing the seriousness of his tone. "What is it, Kunle?" his father asked, his expression concerned. Kunle took a deep breath. "I've met someone. Her name is Abike, and I've asked her to marry me." There was a brief moment of silence as his parents absorbed the news. His mother was the first to speak, her voice filled with a mixture of surprise and confusion. "You've asked someone to marry you? But we didn't even know you were seeing anyone. Who is this woman?" Kunle braced himself for what was to come. "She's someone I met in Lagos. She's a wonderful person, kind, strong, and incredibly wise, but there's something I need to tell you. Abike is older than me. She's 60. His mother's eyes widened in shock, and his father's expression darkened. 60? Kunle, are you out of your mind? His father exclaimed. She's old enough to be your mother. What are you thinking? Kunle remained calm, though his heart was racing. I know it's not what you expected, but I love her. She makes me happy, and I've never felt this way about anyone before. His mother looked at him, her eyes filled with concern and disbelief. Kunle, this isn't right. She's too old for you. How could you even consider marrying someone who's lived a whole life already? You should be thinking about starting a family, finding someone your own age. I don't care about the age difference, Kunle insisted. What matters is how we feel about each other. Abike is the person I want to be with, and I've made my decision. His father shook his head, his voice stern. This isn't just about what you want, Kunle. Think about your future. Think about the kind of life you'll have with her. She's already lived her life. You're just beginning yours. Kunle's mother looked at him with a mixture of fear and sadness. Kunle, are you sure this woman isn't using some kind of charm on you? This doesn't make any sense. You've always been so sensible, so responsible. How can you be making this decision? Kunle's heart ached at his mother's words. He had expected resistance, but hearing her suggest that Abike was using some sort of charm on him was painful. Mom, Abike isn't using any kind of charm or juju. This is my decision, and I've made it with a clear mind. I know it's hard for you to understand, but I love her. She's not just some older woman. She's the person I want to spend my life with. His parents were silent for a long moment, each grappling with their own thoughts. Finally, his father spoke again, his voice softer but still firm. Kunle, we can't support this. We love you, and we want what's best for you, but we can't stand by and watch you make a mistake that could ruin your life. Kunle felt a wave of sadness wash over him. He had hoped, deep down, that his parents might come to understand, but he knew now that it was a hope in vain. I'm sorry you feel that way, he said quietly, but I've made my choice, and I'm going to marry Abike, with or without your blessing. His mother's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out to take his hand. Kunle, please, don't do this. Don't throw your life away for something that can't work. Kunle gently squeezed her hand, his own eyes misting over. I'm not throwing my life away, Mom. I'm choosing to be with the person I love. I hope that one day you'll see that. The rest of Kunle's visit was strained and uncomfortable. His parents were distant, their disappointment very obvious. When he finally left, his heart felt heavy, weighed down by the knowledge that he had hurt the people he loved most. But despite the pain, he knew that he couldn't turn back. He had made his decision, and he was determined to stand by it. When Kunle returned to Lagos and told Abike about the conversation with his parents, she could see the pain in his eyes. She reached out and took his hand, her heart aching for him. I'm so sorry, Kunle, she said softly. I know how much your parents mean to you. Kunle shook his head, his expression resolute. I knew it would be hard, but I don't regret my decision. I love you, Abik, and I'm willing to face whatever comes our way. Abik looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of love and sorrow. I love you too, Kunle, but I don't want to come between you and your family. If this is going to cause you so much pain, maybe we should… Kunle cut her off, his voice firm. No, I've made my choice and I'm not going back. We'll get through this, Abik, together. Despite Kunle's determination, the weeks that followed were difficult. The news of their engagement spread quickly through the family, and the reactions were overwhelmingly negative. Many of Kunle's relatives reached out to him, expressing their disbelief and concern. Some, like his parents, suggested that Abike must have used some sort of charm to sway him, while others simply couldn't understand why he would choose someone so much older. But through it all, Kunle and Abik stood firm. They knew that their love was real, and they refused to let the opinions of others dictate their lives. They continued to plan their wedding, focusing on the joy they found in each other, rather than the negativity surrounding them. As they sat together in Abike's apartment, Kunle looked at her and smiled. No matter what happens, I'm glad we found each other. I wouldn't trade this for anything. Abik smiled back, her heart full of love and gratitude. Neither would I, Kunle. Neither would I. At that moment, they both knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but they also knew that they had found something worth fighting for. Something that transcended age, societal norms, and even the disapproval of those closest to them. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a mixture of anticipation and tension for Kunle and Abik. Their decision to marry had been met with skepticism and disapproval from both their families, but the couple remained resolute. They knew that their love was genuine, and they were determined to celebrate it, even if their journey to the altar was fraught with challenges. Kunle's parents, while still struggling to accept his decision, eventually relented. They knew that Kunle was an adult, fully capable of making his own choices, and despite their reservations, they loved him dearly. Though they weren't thrilled about the wedding, they agreed to attend, hoping that their presence would at least show support for their son, even if they couldn't fully embrace his choice. Abike's children too were torn. They loved their mother and wanted her to be happy, but they couldn't shake the doubts and concerns that had surfaced when they learned of her relationship with Kunle. They worried about the future, about how such an unconventional union would fare in a world that was often unkind to those who strayed from the norm. However, they respected their mother's wishes and agreed to be there on her special day, hoping that in time, they might come to understand the love that had brought their mother and Kunle together. The wedding itself was a modest affair, just as Kunle and Abik had wanted. They chose a small, beautiful garden in Lagos. The guest list was kept short: close friends, a few supportive relatives, and of course, their immediate families. On the day of the wedding, the sky was clear, and the sun shone brightly, as if nature itself was offering its blessing to the couple. Abika arrived at the venue, wearing a simple yet elegant white gown that accentuated her grace and maturity. Her hair was styled neatly, and her face bore a serene expression that belied the nerves she felt inside. Despite the opposition they had faced, today was her day, and she was determined to savor every moment of it. Kunle, standing at the altar, could hardly believe his eyes when he saw Abike walking toward him. She looked radiant, more beautiful than he had ever seen her, and in that moment, all the doubts, all the whispers, and all the opposition faded away. All that mattered was the woman coming to join him in marriage, the woman he loved with all his heart. As Abik reached the altar, Kunle took her hands in his, and they exchanged a look of deep affection, a silent promise that they would face whatever challenges came their way together. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. The officiant spoke of love that transcends age and circumstance, of the courage it takes to follow one's heart, even when the world around you doesn't understand. When it came time for Kunle and Abike to exchange their vows, the air was filled with emotion. Kunle spoke first, his voice steady and filled with conviction. Abike, from the moment we met, you brought light into my life. You've shown me a love that is deep and true, and I promise to cherish and honor you for the rest of my days. I know that our journey together won't always be easy, but I'm committed to facing every challenge with you, hand in hand. Abik's eyes glistened with tears as she responded, her voice filled with warmth and sincerity. Kunle, you've brought joy into my life that I never expected to find again. You've shown me that love can come at any time in any form, and I'm grateful for every moment we've shared. I promise to stand by you, to support you, and to love you with all my heart for as long as we both shall live." As they exchanged rings, sealing their vows, there wasn't a dry eye among the guests. Even those who had been skeptical, including their families, couldn't help but be moved by the deep connection they witnessed between Kunle and Abike. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Kunle leaned in to kiss Abike, a kiss filled with love, gratitude, and a shared sense of triumph. The small crowd erupted in applause, and for a moment, all the tension and opposition melted away, replaced by a sense of joy and celebration. The reception that followed was intimate and warm. Kunle's parents, though still cautious, offered their congratulations, recognizing that their son's happiness was genuine. Abike's children, still processing the whirlwind of emotions, began to see glimpses of the joy their mother had found in Kunle, and though they remained cautious, they couldn't deny the love that was evident between the newlyweds. As the evening wore on and the guests slowly began to depart, Kunle and Abike found themselves standing together in the garden, watching the sunset over the horizon. The air was filled with the sounds of laughter and soft music, but all they could hear was the beating of their hearts, in sync with one another. "Can you believe we're finally married?" Kunle asked, a smile tugging at his lips. Abike leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "It feels like a dream. A beautiful, unexpected dream." Kunle wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. "I'm so glad we took this step, Abike. No matter what happens, I'll always be grateful for this day." Abike looked up at him, her eyes filled with love. "So will I, Kunle. So will I." The couple had planned a short honeymoon, a few days away from the hustle and bustle of Lagos, in a quiet resort by the beach. It was a chance for them to escape the world, to focus on each other, and to celebrate the beginning of their new life together. Their honeymoon was everything they had hoped for and more. But it was their wedding night that stood out most in their memories. After a romantic dinner by the beach, where they shared laughter and heartfelt conversation, as they entered the room, Kunle turned to Abike, his expression filled with love and desire. "Abike," he said softly, "I want this night to be special, just like you've made my life special." Abike smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "It already is, Kunle. Just being with you makes everything perfect." They embraced, their connection deepening as they shared a kiss that was filled with passion and tenderness. The worries and doubts that had plagued them in the weeks leading up to the wedding seemed to dissolve, leaving only the pure, unfiltered love they felt for each other. Their wedding night was a beautiful culmination of everything they had been through together. It was a moment of intimacy and joy that made them forget all the opposition and judgment they had faced. In each other's arms, they found a peace and contentment that transcended the challenges they had overcome. The next morning, as the sun rose over the city, Kunle and Abike lay side by side, their hands entwined. They had crossed a significant threshold in their relationship, and though they knew there would still be challenges ahead, they were ready to face them together. "Kunle," Abike whispered, turning to look at him. "Thank you for loving me, for choosing me, even when it wasn't easy." Kunle smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I'd choose you again and again, Abike. You're worth every challenge, every obstacle. I'm just glad we have each other." As they lay there, wrapped in each other's embrace, they knew that they had something truly special. The weeks after their honeymoon were a period of adjustment and bliss for Kunle and Abike. As they settled into married life, the world outside seemed to matter less. They found comfort in their routines, joy in each other's company, and a sense of peace that made the challenges they had faced feel distant. Their businesses, once fraught with uncertainties, began to flourish as well. Kunle's electronics store gained a loyal customer base, thanks in part to the steady guidance and support he received from Abike. Her wisdom, honed over years of experience, proved invaluable in helping him navigate the complexities of Lagos's business world. Abike's market stall, too, thrived, with customers drawn not just to her goods, but to the warmth and kindness she exuded. Together, they made a formidable team, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Yet, despite the contentment they found in their new life, An unexpected surprise lay just around the corner, one that would challenge them in ways they hadn't anticipated. One morning, Abike woke up feeling unusually fatigued. At first, she dismissed it as the result of a long day at the market, but as the days passed, the fatigue didn't go away. She also began to feel other symptoms: nausea, dizziness, and an inexplicable sense of discomfort. Worried, Kunle insisted that she see a doctor. Abike, always pragmatic, agreed, though she was certain it was nothing serious. She had always been healthy, and at 60 she knew that her body wasn't as resilient as it once was. Still, she wasn't prepared for the news the doctor delivered after a series of tests. "Mrs. Adeyemi," the doctor began gently, his expression serious, "the tests have confirmed that you're pregnant." For a moment, Abike was speechless. She stared at the doctor, trying to process what she had just heard. "Pregnant?" "Yes," the doctor confirmed, his tone compassionate. "It's rare at your age, but not impossible. However, given your age, this will be a high-risk pregnancy. We'll need to monitor you closely and take every precaution to ensure your health and the health of the baby." When Abik returned home and shared the news with Kunle, his reaction mirrored her own initial shock. He stared at her, his eyes wide with a mix of surprise, joy, and concern. "Pregnant," he repeated, as if trying to make sense of it. "Yes," Abik said, her voice still laced with disbelief. "I didn't think it was possible, but here we are." Kunle, after a moment of stunned silence, broke into a wide grin. He took Abike's hands in his eyes shining with excitement. "Abike, this is incredible. We're going to have a baby." Abik smiled, though her expression was more subdued. "Kunle, I'm happy too, but I'm also scared. The doctor said this is a high-risk pregnancy. There are so many things that could go wrong." Kunle's smile softened, and he pulled her into a comforting embrace. "I know it's scary, but we'll get through this together. We'll take every precaution, and I'll be with you every step of the way. We've already faced so many challenges, Abik, and we've come out stronger. We can do this." Abik rested her head against his chest, finding solace in his steady heartbeat. "I hope you're right, Kunle. I want this baby more than anything, but I'm afraid." As the news of Abike's pregnancy spread among their families, the reactions were surprisingly supportive. Kunle's parents, who had struggled to accept his marriage to Abik, were initially shocked but soon rallied around their son and daughter-in-law. The prospect of a grandchild seemed to soften their hearts, and they offered their full support, insisting that Abike rest as much as possible and promising to help in any way they could. Abike's children, too, were taken aback by the news, but their concern for their mother quickly turned into a fierce protectiveness. They flew in from different parts of the world to be by her side, ensuring that she had everything she needed and that she was following the doctor's orders to the letter. Despite their initial skepticism about her relationship with Kunle, they could see how deeply he cared for her, and they found themselves growing closer to him as they bonded over their shared concern for Abike's well-being. The pregnancy was not without its complications. Abike experienced periods of extreme fatigue and bouts of dizziness that left her bedridden for days at a time. The doctors kept a close eye on her, performing regular checkups and prescribing a regimen of medication and rest to help manage the risks. Kunle, true to his word, was by her side through it all, offering comfort and encouragement when she needed it most. As the months passed, the couple's anxiety slowly gave way to cautious optimism. The baby grew steadily, and with each successful checkup, their hope and excitement grew. They began to prepare for the arrival of their child, turning a spare room in their home into a nursery and filling it with everything they would need for their new addition. Despite the challenges of the pregnancy, their businesses continued to thrive. Kunle's electronics store expanded, with new locations opening in other parts of the city, while Abike's market stall became a beloved fixture in the community. The support they received from their families and friends bolstered them, and they faced each day with a renewed sense of purpose and determination. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of waiting and worrying, the day of the baby's arrival came. Abik went into labor early one morning, and Kunle rushed her to the hospital, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The hours that followed were long and tense, as the doctors worked carefully to ensure a safe delivery. Late in the evening, the cries of a newborn filled the delivery room, and Kunle felt a surge of emotion so powerful that it brought tears to his eyes. The doctor handed him a tiny wriggling bundle wrapped in a soft blanket, and Kunle stared down at his child in awe. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, smiling warmly. Kunle looked at Abike, who was exhausted but beaming with happiness. "A girl," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Abike reached out to touch her daughter's cheek, her eyes filled with tears. "Our little Ayo," she said softly, the name they had chosen, meaning joy, fitting perfectly for the new life that had brought so much happiness into their world. As Kunle cradled their newborn daughter, he felt an overwhelming sense of love and gratitude. Ayo was a miracle, a symbol of the love that had defied all odds and brought them together. She was their joy, their hope, and their future. The days that followed Ayo's birth were filled with visits from family and friends, all eager to meet the newest member of the Adeyemi family. Kunle's parents, who had once been so opposed to their son's marriage, were now completely enamored with their granddaughter. They doted on Ayo, marveling at her tiny fingers and toes, and their hearts softened even further toward Abike. Whatever reservations they had once held were now overshadowed by the joy of having a new life in their family. Abike's children too were overjoyed at the arrival of their little sister. They took turns holding her, cooing at her, and taking endless photos to send to friends and relatives. The bond between them and Kunle deepened, as they saw firsthand how devoted he was to their mother, and now to their new sister.